In this video, we're going to focus on the relationship between 10 groups and 5 groups. Now, for a lot of our students, the times 10 doesn't seem to be too difficult for them to master because of our base 10 number system. So when we think about a 3 times a 10, it's 30. 8 times 10 is an 80. Now, I want to make sure in 3rd grade, we're talking about that in terms of being 8 tens, which is the 80, or 3 tens, which is 30. We don't want our students to get into a habit of saying we're adding a 0. The adding a 0 is only working when we have whole numbers. When they get to decimals and they multiply by a 10, if they put a 0 at the end, like they're adding a 0, right? Which is, of course, not plus a 0, it's just putting a 0 at the end of that number. It doesn't change the value. So that rule is going to expire. We don't want to use rules that expire. Instead, in grade 3, our students can talk about it as being, well, 8 times 10 means 8 tens, which is 80. Now in grade 4 and 5, we work on how place values in our number system, that each digit is 10 times the one to its right. So as I'm doing 8 times 10, that 8 is shifting a place value position from the ones place to the tens place. Same thing happens when we're multiplying again by 100 or thousands. It will graduate to that thinking. So we want to make sure, again, we don't allow our students to say, I'm adding a 0, because we're not. We're only shifting a place value position. So with those times 10s under our belt and knowing the single digits times 10s, we can relate that to times 5. Now, for a very long time in my 5th grade classroom, I didn't know about this relationship. I hadn't focused on it and hadn't known it. It seems funny now that I never even considered it, but I would allow my students to skip count by 5s. Many of them could do that easily, but I wanted to, for myself, I knew I wanted to encourage them to at least use the 5 times 5 is 25 and skip count from there. But I didn't yet know about this powerful relationship that 5 groups is half of 10 groups. When I tell you this strategy has changed my life, it is not an understatement. I'm using it all the time now as I'm doing mental math, even with like middle school ratios and proportion problems. It's a crazy powerful strategy, this relationship that 5 groups is half of 10 groups. So in our basic facts, that 8 times 5, I could think about, well, 10 groups of 8 is 80. So 5 groups is half that, which is 40. That thinking then graduate to multiply anything by 5. So I were to ask you to do 5 times 18. Well, 18 times 10 is 180, and half that is 90. It becomes crazy, crazy powerful. And so having that 5 groups as being half of 10 groups, if we can begin exploring that with our 3rd grade kiddos as a beginning there to learn their times 5 facts, super crazy powerful. So here are some visuals to help us see how this relationship is happening, the 5 groups being half of 10 groups. So here you have this 10 frame organization here in this Linking Cubes app in Braining Camp. And each of these 4 10 frames, you can see has 5 of the Linking Cubes. Let's imagine though, that each of these 10 frames was full. Well, it'll be 4 groups of 10, right? 4 10s. And that would make that total amount of those cubes would be 40. But as you can see, we don't have 4 groups of 10, we've got 4 groups of 5, which is half as much. Each of these is half as full, which means that our total amount must be half of the 40. It must be 20. So again, we're interpreting this expression as 4 groups of 10, 4 groups of 5. Now, in this interpretation of the expressions, we've got 10 groups of 6. So you can see we have these 10 rows on this Reck and Rec. I've slid over 6, and I know I did 6 in one slide because of the benchmarking of the 5. The color coding changes at the 5. Now you'll also notice the color coding changes at the 5 rows as well. So I know each of these rows has 6, one more than 5, and here is where I can see the second 5 that makes the 10 in all has kicked in. So all of these beads here, I know the 10 groups of 6. So I know that must be 60. So what must 5 groups of 6 look like? Well, here is where that color coding is helping us see that this is 5 groups of 6. So 5 groups of 6 is half of the 10 groups of 6, and half of 60 is 30. So we can know that there, again, there's that relationship. 5 groups is half of 10 groups. It's super incredibly powerful.